Before we move on to the video, I'd be very grateful if you could like and subscribe. Thank you. The Last Days of Socrates. The hot summer sun of Athens bathed the city's stone-paved streets in a golden hue. Socrates, with his wise and weathered face, seemed to contemplate each of these beauties as if they were philosophical questions. However, these days were not peaceful for Athens' famous philosopher, but rather a dark period. In the city's corners and marketplaces, Socrates' debates, moral inquiries, and challenges were the talk of the town. His philosophical questions and his provocative ideas had begun to unsettle even those who once supported him. One morning, a group of citizens brought charges against Socrates at the Athenian court: impiety, corrupting the youth, and undermining the city's traditional values. The day of the trial arrived, and Socrates stood before the crowd not as a mere defendant, but as a teacher. The lights reflecting off the walls of the courtroom accentuated Socrates' aged face. Some eyes were sad, others curious. With his characteristic calmness and confidence, the philosopher began his defense against the charges. "My words do not corrupt the youth," Socrates said. "I am merely seeking knowledge and trying to find the truth. If young people listen to me, it is their choice. I only encourage them to think." After Socrates' defense, the judge, shaking his head, remarked that these words were considered a constraint on freedom. Socrates' unorthodox and controversial thoughts were perceived as threats to the city's religious beliefs and social norms. After a brief deliberation, the court found Socrates guilty and sentenced him to death. Socrates spent his final day quietly in his cell. In his last letter, he bid farewell to his students and friends. This farewell reflected the philosopher's resolve to face death with composure while continuing to question and think even in his final moments. Finally, on the day of execution, he was presented with a cup of poison. Socrates drank it slowly, and as the effects of the poison took hold, he cast one last serene look at his friends and students. With the poison taking its toll, his eyes slowly closed, his face relaxing into an expression of peace. Socrates' death reverberated through the streets and marketplaces of Athens. His thoughts, once controversial, continued to echo even in the city that had condemned him. After his death, his teachings and methods of inquiry became fundamental cornerstones of Western philosophy. Socrates achieved immortality through his ideas, leaving an eternal mark on the world of thought. And so the last days of Socrates were not merely the end of a philosopher's life, but also the triumph of inquiry and thought.